And so how do we deal with parents that might have good intentions, but they are overly interested in what's going on? And how do you deal with parents that feel that their kid isn't getting a fair shake in your classroom? And, all this pressure that comes on the teacher. It's hard enough to be a teacher where you have all this information that has to be
Absolutely.
done in a certain amount of time with these kids sitting in front of you and trying to handle all of that, but then to have the parents and have that extra pressure.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
If I were to say teaching would be great if there were no, and you would fill in the blank, what would you say? Well, I hope you wouldn't say students, although I have heard that said, honestly. A little rough on the job security, but nonetheless. Maybe you said car line duty. Maybe elementary teachers would say peach cups and yogurt tubes. We've all been doused by those. Maybe secondary teachers said, let's see, how about early dismissal for games, extra duties, chaperone duties, things like that. I can't help but wonder if anyone said parents. Teaching would be great if there were no parents. Well, first, I would argue that without parents, there would be limited students. And if there were students and no parents, well, that would bring a whole other set of adventures for that Wild West. But in all seriousness, parents can be our biggest supporters, our biggest partners, and our teammates. Or really, they could be a source of discouragement, confrontation, even intimidation for some. And that's sad because our job is to partner with parents as they fulfill the responsibilities that God has given to them. So how can we best do this? How can we best understand and partner with this generation of parents? That's the topic we're going to unpack today. Listeners, thank you for joining us today. I think I can be pretty confident that if you are an educator of any type, this topic is going to be for you. By the way, if you're new to the podcast, be sure to check out our episode library with over 2 years of In the Trenches practical episodes. You can also find us on social media. We're Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook and on YouTube. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Teacher Edition Pod. Let me encourage you to stop by our website as well, teachereditionpodcast.com, to learn more about our guests. By the way, I'm not sure if you have noticed, but we do also produce show notes for each of these episodes. And in those notes, we include any resource that has been mentioned during that episode. So whether you're listening on the website or through your favorite podcast platform, be sure to check out those notes. Speaking of platforms, wherever you listen, you have the option to follow or subscribe to the show there. That doesn't barrage you with emails. It literally just makes sure that any new episode of the Teacher Edition podcast drops right there at the top where you can easily access it. Okay, back to parents. And to discuss parents, we also have a parent who is also an educator with us today, Dr. Renton Rathbun. Renton has joined us in the past. It's great to have him back. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's been a college professor for over 25 years. He's taught at both secular and Christian colleges and universities. He also travels around speaking often on biblical worldview and apologetics. Besides his Bachelor of Science degree in English education and an MA in interpretive speech, he also earned an MFA in creative writing, an MA in philosophy, a Master of Theology, and a PhD in apologetics. And I'm assuming somewhere in that whole list, he must also have a parenting certificate as well. Renton is also the host of the podcast, The Renton Rathbun Show, a new podcast focused totally on parents and helping parents navigate today and what we're facing, what our students are facing. So sometime we'll have to talk about, by the way, how you came up with the name to that show, Renton. Anyway, listeners, if you haven't checked out that podcast, The Renton Rathbun Show, you can grab that link down there in the show notes that I just mentioned. He covers a wide variety of topics. He gets way down in the weeds and practical as he talks about the culture that we're facing today. Renton, I think we have an interesting topic ahead of us today, so welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Okay, so in my opening, I might have mentioned that for some teachers, parents really bring some struggles to the occasion and the equation. I'm assuming you might agree on that one. So, that's a pretty broad statement. And I want to clarify, by the way, as we get started, that this in no way represents all parents. Some parents are just absolutely fantastic to work with. But what would you say are some common difficulties that teachers today face as they deal with parents?
Well, and you're right. To be fair to parents, we tend as teachers to concentrate on the ones that are the squeaky wheels.
That's right.
But those kind of confrontations can really change even how you view your job. It can be a real challenge when you feel, especially the heat from a parent that then affects the administrator, because the administrator understands that this is not just a customer, but it is someone that is bringing in income for the school. And so there has to be some carefulness. And so if he defends the teacher too much, then, you could lose a customer. If you don't defend the teacher, you lose an employee. And so this can really be a problem because we don't live at a time where parents immediately take the side of the teacher.
Right.
Um,
Hasn't that changed? I'm
it
sorry,
has.
growing up, my parents always believed the teacher first. Like I had to prove, my point. It was always if the teacher said it, that's what happened. But you are so right. Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to distract, but yeah, big change.
Yeah. Well, and that change is significant because this has gone even into college. Now, in college, you have another thing going on because there are there's these rights that kids have to privacy once they're 18, and so the parents can't get as involved. And so I enjoyed that for many years. But eventually parents were getting involved because with the kids today are so entangled with mom and dad doing things for them that they sign, these rights away so that the parents can then inject themselves into the
Yeah,
situation.
fight their battles.
Yes, because they don't like the confrontation. And so now we have this, and you've heard the term helicopter parents
Oh,
and all
yes.
that sort of thing. And that exists. But there's also maybe not a helicopter parent, but definitely a parent that wants a lot of information about what's going on. And so how do we deal with parents that might have good intentions, but they are overly interested in what's going on? And how do you deal with parents that feel that their kid isn't getting a fair shake in your classroom? And, all this pressure that comes on the teacher. It's hard enough to be a teacher where you have all this information that has to be
Absolutely.
done in a certain amount of time with these kids sitting in front of you and trying to handle all of that, but then to have the parents and have that extra pressure.
Right.
I know what it's like to sit in front of an administrator because you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I have gotten in trouble for things I've said. I know it's hard to believe. I'm a very
no. The truth
reserved
is out.
person. So,
Yeah, reserved. I think we need to cut here and talk first.
So I mean, I know what it's like for a teacher to be in that position, even though you're right, even though you didn't do anything wrong, but you're sitting there in that office and there's a problem. And even when your administrator is on your side and says, "Look, I understand, these parents are, have issues," you're still sitting there. You're still the one to blame, and you're still the one that has to talk to somebody who may not be completely reasonable. And it's an incredible amount of pressure. And so with all that, this is the new normal. This isn't
Right.
something that we have to kind of work through for a few months or a few years. This is the new normal. And so how do we deal with that is the question.
Yeah, agreed. So I don't know if maybe you've noticed, like I've noticed, but it seems like parents are getting younger and younger these days. I mean, no reflection on our age, just an observation. The millennials have now gotten older. They are now the parents. And I would dare say, when we look at our parents and at today's parents, we are going to see a few contrasting elements, maybe we could put it that way. What would you say makes millennial parents unique, since that's going to be the majority of our parents in schools these days?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, just so you know, because a lot of people don't like, labels. We live in a time where people want to choose their labels. But
Oh, yes.
millennials typically are people born between 1981 and 1996, 97 into 2000, some of them. But that's kind of the basic, the basic idea of where they are. But what's interesting about millennials is that their net worth has surpassed Gen X. That's me.
Interesting.
And their net worth has surpassed us by 20%.
Oh, yeah, that's significant.
They've surpassed boomers by 31%. Well, why is that significant? Well, that's significant because they're showing themselves to be people that have money that is usable out in the world to put their kids into private schools. And so these are your customers. These are the ones that are looking to do something special with their kids, not just put them in public school and see how that goes. They want to spend some money on their kids' education. Another interesting thing about millennials is that they are usually called the digital natives. In other words, this is the first generation to be submerged in the technology we have today, especially social media. Yeah, internet, the whole thing. But 93% of millennials own smartphones. Now, I know that many people out in the world, over and over, people are saying this new generation, they don't know how to work and they're not, they're lazy. And we do this the people before us did it.
If it's not ours, we pick on them.
Yeah, that's right. And, there's some points to be made. And of course, the generation that comes up never likes to hear that, like, we're not lazy, you don't understand us, and all that sort of thing. So this has happened every generation. They look back at the newer generation, say they don't know what they're doing. But I do want to say this is unique. What makes the millennials so unique is that technology is at a place that it's never been, ever. And it's not just technology in washing, being able to have a dishwasher or something like that. This is technology that connects the world. So you have technology that connects the world and then technology that engrosses your life. So this isn't just convenience technology. And it's not just a way to be able to connect to people outside, but it's technology that puts your face in front of a screen for long periods of time. And that's going to change your personality. In fact, what screen time does, actually rewires your brain, because your brain starts to accept new normals that we otherwise didn't have. And so what makes the millennial generation so interesting to us is how are they going to connect? There are still lots of teachers that are Gen X that are my age. There's many teachers, there are even some boomers, especially in Christian schools. You have a lot of people that have retired from teaching a public school, and now they're teaching in a Christian school during their retirement. So you're seeing a lot of older generation teachers, not everybody, of course, but many. And so then they become very confounded when they come across someone who has lived their life in front of a screen,
right?
Which changes how they communicate.
Sure.
And this is at the core of the issue for teachers. How are we supposed to communicate with millennials? Because some of us remember communication being very different than it is today, and the millennials are very tech savvy. And so even though a lot has changed since they were young, they've kept up on it because this is the currency of their time. And so we have to, especially if you're older and you remember the internet coming in, then you're someone that needs to understand how they communicate.
Yeah, that's a great insight. It is true. I mean, they don't remember a time without all of this. It's hard to believe, and we remember those as just big monumental days. I remember when our family got our first cell phone. We had the big bag phone, and then we had the big brick phone and all that. And that's all it did was place calls. Like, it wasn't your life, so that is so true. And we sometimes forget that, and we get irritated with them, but we don't understand that is all that they know. So I'm glad you kind of laid that foundation, because I think we're going to come back to that. So in looking back at my own time in school, and really even the early years of in my educational experience, I guess I remember parents being there, being involved, but I don't remember that presence like you talked about that we see in some parents today. What is that? And I guess why, since we're talking millennials, why would you say millennial parents have such a large effect really on the entire school? What is that? What's that stemming from?
Okay, let me start with this example. So as someone doing podcasts, you have to suddenly become very connected to all the social media outlets that are out there. And I even noticed that you guys on the Teacher Edition podcast has something on TikTok.
Yes.
I mean, that's very progressive. Very progressive.
Thank you.
Not
Yes,
even
we have
the
a
Renton
lot of
Rathbun
following
show.
there.
So TikTok.
Oh, well, good to know.
But now I will.
Oh,
Now I
wow.
will.
The competition's
But, you know,
on.
as from my generation, it is hard to understand the importance of social media. We complain about social media and we get upset about social media, but it's a very important tool and you can't ignore it. So I am still trying to figure out Instagram. It confounds me.
Me too.
You can't put links up. What are they, barbarians? And then it's just a picture or a video. And then how do they get to what I want them to get to if I'm just going to put up a video? What is this? By your entertainer?
Everything's abbreviated and it's just all in pictures. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't get it either.
I don't get it. And it's frustrating.
So let's just stay away from everyone who uses it.
Yeah. But I've noticed that when I get frustrated with it, my first, and this is from my generation, my first thought is, oh, well, forget that. I'm not doing that.
Exactly.
Now, millennials don't do that. Millennials look at these different social media spots and understand how important they are because remember, the currency that they run on is how am I connected to things? I got to stay connected. And so they put a lot of emphasis on that. Now, when we, from our generation, we just say, oh, that's stupid. I'm not dealing with that. That kind of puts us in a pocket for them in their mind of someone that doesn't want to be connected. It's almost like not, if someone is big on taking their shoes off, and you come into their home and you don't do it, you don't say anything, but you're just a little perturbed, And I think that's kind of how they feel. They're like, oh, you don't care about being connected. It's like, well, no, technology keeps changing and I'm old. But they see it as you don't want to be connected. And the reason why they are so effective and they affect so much of the school is they stay connected. That's how they believe they're making a difference in the world and being able to actually be involved. And so we put very low, concentration on social media because we don't feel that's really being involved. From my generation, being involved is looking at someone face to face. You can smell their breath. You can get to know them. You slap them on the shoulder and you say, hey, Jim. And, that's our generation, right? But for them, being connected means I got to stay connected in my social media. I can stay connected to my kids that way. I stay connected to my teacher that way. I got to stay connected. And so when they're doing that, we could actually lose influence in our school because we have separated ourselves from that kind of connectivity because we're just not used to it. And I'm not saying that this is a prerequisite. I'm just saying when they see you're not connected that way, they see it as, well, do you really care? And so you have to show maybe different ways that you care.
Right.
But that connectivity is going to help them talk to Janice, who has their kid in 5th grade. And she's also connected to Phyllis, who has her kid in the senior high world. And they're all connected and they're all talking to each other. And they're all, and they're posting stuff. This is what Mrs. Smith made us do in class. And they post that. And they're kind of communicating about what's going on in class right there in the social media. And you can say, well, I don't care about that. But that's how they're actually keeping tabs on your work out there in the world. And so the other part that you have to remember is this is kind of changing in the homeschool world where men are getting a lot more involved in the education. That was not the case for many years.
Right.
But in the Christian school world, men are still kind of detached.
Sure.
And so you have a lot of mothers that are trying to stay connected. And sometimes they are trying to compensate because their husband isn't as connected as maybe she would want him to be.
Right.
And so that's another issue where fathers are abdicating responsibility of their involvement. And when you do that, what you produce are mothers that feel insecure about what's going on. because hubby has decided, I'm going to work and I'm making money so you can send him to that school. And when we send him to the school, I don't have to worry about it anymore. And sometimes guys think that way. And so that produces wives who feel insecure. And when they feel insecure, they feel, I got to really be connected because, John doesn't do much. I got to do it all. And so you have that kind of mentality going as well, where this desire to be involved they're not just trying to be a Karen. What they're trying to do is to stay connected because they feel that they might feel alone in this
Right.
work of trying to get the kid educated and be connected to their education.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so speaking of families, we're all impacted in different ways by our families. It's the culture we grew up in, the events around us. Honestly, the philosophy and personality, I guess you could say, of our generation, the millennials, they're definitely no exception. They definitely made a splash growing up, and now here they are as the grown-ups, and those elements play out now in their adult lives. We're touching on some of these as we go. What would you say are the particular issues that they faced growing up that are now having an effect on them as adults? And I guess more specifically, of course, since this is an educational podcast, how's that, I guess, impacting how they interact with teachers? So what's coming from their past that we're seeing now as we interact with them?
So when you study what had been going on from the 80s to the 90s as kids are being born and what's going on in the family and things like that, what we have found, and this is not just a Christian research company that's out to show how unspiritual everybody is, but this is research even from secular places that have found that, number one, this generation grew up with a lack of information discernment. So kids today are starting to understand, or at least on some level, that there isn't too many neutral places anymore. And we kind of discovered this, especially, as we continue, is Fox News really, this neutral place in the middle? Is CNN just trying to do their best to communicate, the news? Well, no, everyone has an edge. Everyone has a direction they're trying to go because that's where the money is. And we have to be cynical about that. But the millennials grew up thinking, if it's on the internet or it's from a source that appeals to me, then I can trust it. And you have a lot of millennials that are getting their news from social media, even TikTok and things like that, and they will not see that as strange. This information discernment problem is particularly notable in that particular generation, because we grew up as a generation that is now introduced the internet. So we were super skeptical right on the outset,
Absolutely.
but they grew up with it. So it's
anything that you can get that easy must not be true, right?
Exactly.
We were used to doing our own research, real research. Now you can just get it. Yes, absolutely. I can see the contrast.
And so there's, that part, that's an issue, but another issue is human connection. How do you interact with another human in person? What does that look like? Can you read someone well so you know how to interact with them? And maybe some of you will notice this at church. It's kind of like when you talk to someone at church, it's kind of like serving a ball. So, where do you work? And they're like, I work over at the county, whatever. And they're like, oh, okay. And they just stare at you. You're like, do you like it there? And you serve them another one, right? And they're like, yeah, it's okay. And you're just like, oh man, come on, man.
Right.
Ask me a question. Just pretend you're interested. But this idea, putting a screen in front of your face for so long, the expectation is being served, is like, how am I being served? Now, they don't think of it that way, but that's what a screen does. A screen is designed to serve you and to give you information. And so then when you come across a human, you start thinking, oh, well, how are they going to serve? This is interesting. They want to know where I work. And so I'm going to tell them. And they want to know if I like it. So I'm going to tell them. We're having a great conversation. I'm having a good time. And the other guy is just dying because he's trying to think of questions so that there isn't this weird, awkward pause. And it never occurs to them that even if I don't actually feel like I care about you, I should ask a question. because that's how humans are. But screen time really does mess with your psyche, and you don't think about how am I serving this person? Even though I don't know them or seem interested in talking to them, I need to do something. And the third thing I would say that the growing up in the millennial generation has done is it has made them question authority. So authority is an issue. They have done a lot of studies on social media and found that social media gains its edge and gains people's interest when it questions authority the most. And so, this is why everyone's interested in the Epstein files. We got to find out the Epstein files, because even if I like the guy who's president right now, if you don't give me those Epstein files, it's just more authority that hasn't delivered.
Nature.
Yeah. And we just can't stand the authority structures that seem to oppress us, and we don't have a voice, and we've got to have a voice. And social media, and this is how social media has gotten so popular. I'm going to be your voice. The structures out there are against you, but I'm going to give you that voice. And that's where social media gains all its strength. And if you keep preaching that long enough, you start being very cynical about any kind of authority, and that means the authority of who has authority over my child when I send them to school. Who thinks they have authority over me? Like the teacher? Does the teacher think they have authority over me? That whole structure of that school. I'm not sure about that anymore, and I'm not sure if I can trust that. And it seems like the administrator just kind of does what he wants. And I complained about this on Instagram, and I was ignored. And now this administrator is going ahead and doing this. Like he just can do whatever he wants. And so then they have this, they're used to this structure of thinking when it comes to authority, that the authority has power, you don't have power. My power has to come from my influence in the world through my social media, and that's how I can reach them. And if I ever get face to face with that teacher, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Even if I'm not angry with them, I'm angry with someone else, they're going to hear it. And so that is going to affect them because they have grown up with a very cynical view of authority in general, let alone when it comes to their own kids. And so how you communicate to them is going to be really important, knowing that they're already having a kind of issue about authority as it is. What we've even found in churches is that less and less millennials actually become members of churches. They'll go to a church for years and years and years, but they won't become a member because what does that mean? Well, now you're in the structure. What if one of the elders
Under
or deacons?
the authority. Yep.
Yeah. Elders or deacons can come up and talk to you about what you're doing wrong, and they can enact discipline on you. And that's more of those authority structures that may be oppressing you. And so that kind of mentality. And again, like you said at the beginning, this is not everybody. This is not every millennial. I know there's millennials watching this going, I'm not that way at all. I'm a normal person.
Stop stereotyping. Yeah.
I grew up and I didn't even have a cell phone until I was 30 or whatever. And that's awesome. And I'm not even saying the people that follow the patterns I'm saying are evil people that need to be eliminated. I'm just saying that this tends to be a way of thinking for this generation that if you run into it, do not be surprised.
That's a trend. Yeah. Okay. So following along that same line, what are some challenges from their growing up days that would be good for teachers to have on their radar? So you kind of touched on it, but help us out with teachers. That's who's going to be listening as they're facing these trends that you're pointing out that are, pretty prevalent. Even if they're the sweetest, kindest people, that is still the generation they grew up in. What can teachers do? What are some strategies for them?
Okay, so teachers, one thing you have to know is, especially with this generation, there was a huge lack of grit in this generation. You have to know that. And I know that sounds insulting, but grit is the idea that built in you is the desire to keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. This generation, because of the instant gratification of technology, has a hard time holding to that principle. And so you have to know that. So when you're talking to them about their child and you say, this is what needs to be worked on at home, please work on this at home. Do not be surprised when they said, we tried that and it didn't work.
Yeah, we tried once.
Yes. Or maybe they even tried twice and it still didn't work. And so knowing that, you have to know that when they say we tried that and it didn't work, immediately understand that probably they did try it a few times, and because it didn't work, they're not going to do it anymore. So you have to turn the conversation to endurance. Not that this particular thing is actually going to work and it's going to produce the outcome that they desire. If you start talking about outcomes with your parents, they're going to expect that when I do this, this outcome is what we want. And usually they're thinking A's, usually they're thinking behavior, usually they're thinking, how do they sit still long enough so I stop hearing from, my teacher? Whatever it is, they're going to be thinking about those kind of outcomes. What you have to turn it to is life principles. If you want Johnny to have the life principle of, not giving up and keep trying hard and have faith that the Lord will help them, then they need to do this. So don't, because my first temptation was to say, if you do this, Johnny will sit still better. Or if you do this, Johnny will do better on his tests. And he may not, and he may never sit still. However, if you start teaching millennials that what's important is this principle of how they're going to be when they grow up and what kind of a person they're going to be, because this is how millennials are tuned deeply into what's going on in our society, and what's going on in our society right now is identity. And so use
For
that.
sure.
What kind of a young man is Johnny going to be? What we want in this class is to help them create patterns so that they can be that thing. Give them a longer shot than just what can be done in that classroom. And so when you ask them to work on something at home, or when you say, this is why I did what I did in the classroom, that seemed kind of harsh to Johnny, and I know he thinks it's harsh, but this is the vision I have for Johnny. I see Johnny as being a young man that pursues and doesn't give up, and I know you want that for Johnny too. And so when you start moving from outcome to principle, they start connecting to that better. And I think that's going to be important, because a lot of millennials grew up also without a kind of male headship in the home. A lot of this generation grew up with men that did not lead in the home. And so mom had to lead. And so when you see people like that, what you're going to find, and this is to those of you that are male teachers or male administrators, there's going to be a lot of maybe distrust for males, particularly because they grew up with a dad that was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed dad, but he wasn't a leader. He was kind of mom's oldest son. And, and he was kind of goofy, and we just loved that about him. And when people describe their father like he's their favorite child, something what didn't work right in the family structure.
Absolutely.
And, you have a lot of millennials that grew up with dads who had man caves. And man caves are basically a structure you put together so that you don't have to be in charge. You don't have to be, leading.
You don't have to lead. Yeah.
Yeah. You get to be the guy that's kind of like the kid. You watch TV with your friends until mom sends you up, to eat the meal she prepared for you. And so, with that in mind, you really have to understand, men, that the world has taught them male leadership means abuse. And so I feel safe with men that act like children, or men that are goofy, but I certainly can't relate to a man that leads. And so part of your work, male teachers, is this. You need to show how leadership looks as a man in a classroom, and that it is unique as a man, just like leadership in a classroom for a woman is unique as a woman. And so you have to lead them that way. In fact, I would even say for this generation, you have to be more of a mentor than even, if I can put it this way, a lot of times our goal is to have partners as parents, that our parents are our partners.
Absolutely. Right.
And a lot of times that just happens because that's who they are, and that's awesome. But you're going to run into a lot of parents that aren't ready to be partners yet. And your work as a teacher, and I know you don't have time to barely do your job, let alone put this on you. But this is part of your work, is to mentor these parents to become partners so that you are trusting each other and that you are giving them a pathway to trust. You're giving them a pathway to believe in what you're doing in that classroom is right for their kid, even if they wouldn't do it that way at home. And in fact, most of the time, they wouldn't do it at home, and that's the biggest problem you run
Absolutely.
into.
And they tell us that. Yeah, I wouldn't do this at home.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't usually walk in straight lines at home either. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going down that path if you don't mind. Because obviously we want to look for ways to build those bridges and to partner with them. So we've kind of talked some of the challenges. We've kind of talked, what are their traits or trends or whatever. We can definitely build those bridges better if we can understand them better, of course. How do you suggest that teachers reach out, connect, and build those bridges? You've kind of, again, already touched on this a little bit, but what would you say are some opportunities for teachers who have millennial parents to build those bridges and try to make that connection, even if that isn't how they would typically do something?
Yeah. This is the tough part because, let me put it this way. For a lot of pastors today, the people that they put the most time into end up leaving. It's one of those heartbreaking things about being in the ministry where you pour time into this family and they are a problem, in the church, and you're helping them and you're counseling them, and they're calling you up at 3 a.m. because of some big fight and they need some counsel right then and there, and you do it, and you're just pouring yourself into this family, and then they say, "Oh, we don't like what you did. We're going to leave now," and then they just go. They blow out of there. I think that's a mindset you have to be ready for in the work you do as a teacher. That the parents that you pour a lot of time, sweat, and tears into might blow out of there.
Right, for sure.
And even if you're an elementary school teacher, you have those parents maybe for a year, unless they have younger kids that are coming in. So it feels temporary. And I can tell you, because it feels temporary, you feel like, well, if I just patch this relationship with a Band-Aid, they're going to be moving on anyway, and I can just move on with my life, and we just have to get through this. I would say this. You have an incredible opportunity where in some places, many churches have failed, but now you have this opportunity in mentoring. And this is going to take work from administrators to partner with their faculty, and this would be partner work. This would not be work like, okay, faculty, this is what I want you to do because we need a better situation here, and so I'm going to pour more work on you. But when the administrators and the faculty partner together to say, what kind of a school are we going to be? Are we going to try and mentor the families? Because that's very different than merely partnering. With partnering, I think there was a time where you could probably just immediately do that. I don't know if we're there anymore. I think what we want families that will eventually, our goal for them is to be a partner with us. So what are the opportunities we have to reach that generation to become partners with us? So by the time their kid is a senior in high school, we have actually not just helped a young person become a better person. We've actually helped a whole family. And so what are those steps? And some of it is to be more visible on the internet. And I know that's, our generation kind of feels that that's silly and, well, that's not real. But being more visible on social media is a way to connect. That doesn't have to be your only step. If that's your only step, then that's bad. But if that's a way for you to connect with a family that normally doesn't do much with you, that could be the first step. The second step is to when you bring them in, the conversation needs to be not just about little Johnny that you have in the class and what Johnny needs to work on, and you're so proud of Johnny because you always have to say positive things first and all that sort of thing. Even if
the
there's
Oreo
very little
cookie, yes.
Yes, I was so proud of Johnny, and then the praise is very weak.
Yeah, I know.
But even ask questions about them. Ask questions so that you start reading them and you start realizing, okay, I noticed that, you know, maybe the husband didn't come to the meeting, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, your husband couldn't come. And you just leave it there and see if they'll tell you why. Like, well, he works. And then you're like, oh, wow, he works at this time. That's so now I know I'm dealing with a kid whose dad probably isn't home very much. Start reading those things, because what that will do is produce in you some understanding of where they're coming from, maybe garner some sympathy, so that you begin to care about how you can be intentional about the family. And so once you start gaining that information, you can start really giving ways they can help Johnny. And as they're helping Johnny, you're giving them information about really how their family can help be a better family. So as you start giving them information, you start saying, Johnny really needs some reading practice. Do you think that maybe you could have him read to dad when he gets home or on Saturday? Because, I've heard Johnny really thinks dad is like the greatest thing. So he's going to really try to impress dad. And I think that'd be a good strategy. What do you think about that? And now you're trying to actually help them and mentor them into family time that connects them.
Right.
So that when you have better families, you have better students. I mean, it's just the
100%.
bottom line.
Yes.
And so if you can speak into the family, you're really doing more than what you think you are.
Yeah.
Because they do listen.
Right. For sure. Okay, so this is all super helpful. I think we could go on many episodes in this. But as we close, we've talked about how teachers can grab up those opportunities, build those relationships. She gives some really practical tips there. But I wonder if you have any other resources for Christian schools to actually tap into to help millennial parents support the teachers. So like you said, and I was even thinking while you're talking about how if we're helping the student and we can help the family, and families are going to give us, just better overall. I actually know of a school, they offer parenting classes, I guess, for lack of a better word, once a month. And if you come, they feed you dinner. So there can be no excuses. They're trying to remove it. They will feed you dinner. They'll watch your children do your homework, doing the homework with them so that the parents can attend the seminar. And then they give them a small tuition discount on top of it. And it really, really motivated the families to come. And it spread, like they loved it. It was making those connections, not just, and I understand the internet, so important putting things out there, but it kind of pulled them into that one-to-one. And they were able to come alongside and just give them just some really helpful things that they could do in their homes, which then, of course, then played out back at school. I thought that was just a fantastic, and it was a huge success. They continue to do it. It was just an amazing thing. Do you have any resources, that they can use to help support teachers and parents, I guess parents more in supporting the teachers in their classroom goals? And I mean more than, of course, listening to the Renton Rathbun show. We'll throw that in there again. But do you have any other resources as we close for today?
So what you mentioned was a great idea, to have them come in person and things like that. I think another great way to reach, especially this generation, is to use a medium that they're used to using, which is online work.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Paul Tripp
Yes.
with Paul Tripp Ministries just came out with, I think it's a short series on rearing children, and it's absolutely free. It comes with study guides. It comes with him speaking, comes with all this stuff. And so what you can do is create a way to offer your parents, say, now, if you take this course and deliver to us, your notes or, something to show that they actually went through it.
Some accountability.
Yeah. And it's on their own pace, and they can do it, throughout the summer, or they can do it throughout a semester or maybe a year. And give them something that, like a tuition benefit, because, what we forget is that this tuition benefit, you think, well, we are bare bones as it is. How do we, some of it's faith, but some of it is you actually can save money with families when families are all in.
Yeah.
You actually lose a lot of money because of disciplinary issues and the kind of time it takes out of your employees to deal with all these issues. When those issues start coming down, you actually literally start saving money. And so a way of saving money is make them go through those classes. They're absolutely free. And it's really good stuff because he's talking about the heart and how we are people that are supposed to develop the heart work in our children, not just behavior work. And that's something that's really foreign to every parent because the only way we know if we're doing a good job is if they're behaving. And so we do behavior work. And then when they become teenagers, we're shocked that they are rebelling against all the behavior work we did when we really should have been working on their heart. And we don't even know really what that means. And to have that kind of stuff done for you, especially with Paul Tripp, he's very engaging. So using something like that where the parents can do it from home, it's kind of like an online class, but you've done zero work to put it together. But if you watch it and you like it, then go ahead and use it. And of course, I would also say, using the Renton Rathbun show as a resource.
I knew it was coming.
I mean, only because I just got word that it's the greatest podcast in all of America. I heard it on the internet, so it's true.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I mean,
are you a millennial?
To tell your parents, look, we have this resource for you. Because what the whole show is designed to do is to tell parents what kind of worldviews are coming at them and their children and how to respond to them biblically. My big thought is this. I believe parents are unaware of how bloody the battle is when it comes to spiritual battle. Yeah. I mean, you can tell them we're in a spiritual battle and they're like, oh yeah, but I mean, they got 1,000 things going on. The dads are, working their tails off at work and trying to get that all done. The moms, if they're stay-at-home moms, they have a huge job. But if they're trying to do stay-at-home mom and working and doing all this stuff, they don't have time to know that there are worldviews that are coming after their kids, whether it be through a Superman movie or it be through Taylor Swift or whatever it is. They don't have time for all that. And so this podcast is designed, hey, this is the worldviews that are coming after your kids, and this is how it's getting to them. And the more aware they are of that, the more they start thinking, I need help. And who's going to be my help? And it's the teachers that are going to be their help. The teachers are not your enemy. They're actually your battle buddy in a massive war that has been raging for thousands of years with an enemy that's coming after your children. And so, any kind of resource like that, I think, is going to be hugely important to get families aware of what's out there. And that's why your teacher is your best friend.
Yeah, great strategy. This is all right down where the educators work every day. And as if we've said, as if managing and leading a classroom isn't enough, partnering with parents is equally a task, honestly, in so many ways. But while we know that parents are vital and our partnership with them is vital, are we putting in our work and are we giving our best effort as well? And I appreciate that you mentioned, how we can come alongside them, but then also encourage them to be better parents and come alongside them with resources. I love the idea of being able to do it on your own. I do appreciate your podcast and that it does really spotlight those things because we can just say, beware, but I really like that you get down in the weeds and really, show them those things. So thank you so much for these practical insights. Thanks for the resources as well. And as always, it's been great to have you on the show again.
Thanks for having me.
Listeners, I hope you are walking away with better insights and a resolve to connect and partner with the parents that God has given you this year. We tend to focus on how we're going to impact our students, but you just never know how the Lord might use you in the life of a parent this year. So as we close out another episode, just a reminder, go stop by the teachereditionpodcast.com to learn more about the show. Also, go submit some questions for our upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now, it's time to get back to your day. But it's not just any day. Every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Now, go do what God has called you to do.